Hey, so in church, we're going through 1 Corinthians 15 and covering the whole subject of the resurrection from the dead. And it brings up all sorts of questions. And one of the questions that somebody in the congregation asked me recently was, is it okay for Christians to be cremated? Is that a sin? Is that somehow against the Bible? Should I be cremated? Should I be buried? Let me share just a couple pastoral and biblical thoughts about the idea. First of all, burial, actually preparing the body and burying the body into the earth and putting the body with reverence and care into the earth is the norm. And we see that both in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. Both testaments show a lot of respect for the body, and to the whole ceremony of putting the body in has a lot of imagery in it that for Christians and Jews are very important in symbolizing the whole belief in the resurrection, that one of these days that body is going to get back up again. And in Christian history, the idea of burial has, as the gospel spread, the practice of burial often came into conflict with the pagan practice of just burning the body. Now, but I don't think that in any way that cremation is a sin. I don't think it's wrong. I think Christians can be cremated, but it's important to understand a few principles why Christians, like Orthodox Jews and even like Muslims, usually have the practice of burial, and why that's important but not necessary. At least it's not necessary for Christians. Orthodox Jews and Muslims, at least as far as I understand, wouldn't practice cremation. That would be forbidden. But Christians I think, have the opportunity to do so. But it's good to think these things through. First of all, cremation is not mentioned a lot in the Bible. There's only a couple references I can think of in the Old Testament. One would be where King Saul and his sons, Jonathan and his others, they lost in the battle against the Philistines. And then the Philistines come in and they really violate their bodies. They cut them, mark them. They kind of put them on display. The body of King Saul, they're used sort of like as a trophy to show the Philistine might. And in the night, some of the people, the men from Jabesh Gilead, they go and they capture these bodies. They take them off the wall, I believe it was, there in a Philistine city, and they bring them back. And it says that they burned the bodies. Now, that is kind of the only real reference where you might have a positive cremation. Their bodies have been violated by the Philistines, and the Philistines saw it sort of as a trophy. And so the Jewish men went and captured the bodies, and instead of burying it somewhere where perhaps it would risk the Philistines might come back and try to find them, they just burned the bodies. Perhaps that's because the bodies had already been desiccated, or violated in some way, or they feared that their bones, the Philistines would come looking for their bones or something. So they burned it. And there's nothing in the Bible, nothing in Scripture, nothing said from King David that would make them think that they did wrong by violating it. So that it was perhaps the one place you might find something positive about cremation. The people had a good reason to burn the body this time, and it was done respectfully. It was done out of great respect for King Saul. Later in the Old Testament, in the book of Amos, one of the judgments pronounced against, I think it might have been Moab. There in Amos chapter 1 and 2, Amos, rebukes the pagan nation. And I believe it was Moab where Amos speaks against Moab because they had taken the bones, the body of the kings of Edom, and then just burned them up in sort of a mocking ritual to show disrespect for their kings. And God condemns that. So whereas the cremation of the body of Saul was out of respect for Saul, the cremation of the kings of Edom by Moab was to show disrespect. And so that's what I really think the point is. I think one of the reasons Christians, like Jews before, have gone out of their way to do a full burial is both for belief in the sanctity of the body, that the body is special and sacred, but also for us. It gives us a chance to say goodbye to the person, to mourn, and to express hope in a future resurrection. Now, Of course, what happens to that body once it's buried? Well, it turns to dust. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 20, I think that's where we get that the expression, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. That probably comes from Genesis 3 and Ecclesiastes 3, where it says reference that, as human beings, we come from the dust of the earth and we're going to go back to being dust. Now, if you're cremated, that happens very quickly, but if you're buried, well, that still happens. It just happens a whole lot slower through the process of decomposition. So it's not about do we cremate or bury. I think burial is done for a special reason, unlike the pagan practice where they would burn the body and you saw the smoke going up and you thought the soul was being released, or whether it be Valhalla or any of these other places. We believe in a physical resurrection from the dead. And so I think burial is a good practice. It is a good thing to do, but increasingly it's expensive, and cremation is often the cheaper option. I don't think any Christian family that struggles to afford a burial should feel under compulsion that they have to bury. Cremation can be done, and it can be done in a respectful way. If that's what the family can afford, well, great. You go for cremation. Just remember, when Jesus comes back, there's going to be a resurrection, and he's not going to have any more difficulty raising from the dead a cremated person who became dust quickly than a buried person who became dust really slowly over, depending on, I guess, the coffin, maybe hundreds of years, or if it was embalmed or whatever, we're still going to become dust, and Jesus is still able to resurrect us. So I think Christian families, particularly if they're struggling for the unfortunate high costs of burials, they should feel under no guilt, under no sense of shame. Just treat, when you say goodbye and whatever you do with the ashes, whether you bury the ashes, we're doing it with respect. We believe that God doesn't just value the soul, but he does the body as well. Okay, there's a few of my thoughts. There is value to the Christian practice of burial, but it should not be seen as necessary. Certainly there should be no condemnation for those Christians who choose, for whatever reason, for financial or other reasons, choose the option of cremation. What are your thoughts? Love to hear some of them. Please leave a comment below. If you'd like to hear more questions like this addressed, please, if you're watching this on YouTube, then like and subscribe, and we can engage with these sorts of questions again. Later. Have a good day.